also wanted to say thank you to the hotel. It's a terrific venue and good breakfast and great help from the staff. Also, big thanks to Kun Walliporn from TCC Technologies, without whom this event would not have happened, and so we want to thank her for that. And also to the AMCHAM staff who were terrifically helpful, Kun Ben and her colleagues. From the panelists about their specific areas of knowledge and expertise. Then following the panel discussions, also an opportunity for Q&A from the audience. And we hope you'll take advantage of that. Because
what we can start with is, I would request the panelists to kind of share what opportunities and challenges they face vis-a-vis their organization in dealing with the upcoming fintech or the regulatory space, or how the innovation, or somebody may call it the disruption, is entering the financial services or the financial technologies of Thailand. So maybe I can start with Kun Tipsuda for the presentation on your.
Morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be present and to share my thoughts on what I think are our challenges to support fintech in Thailand. I have a one-page slide that sums up the challenges. The first challenge is on the legal foundation for digitization, and it's still, the problem still remains. Although we trade stocks in a scriptless manner, the law requires actual script, but you can put it in a depository and then have the representation. So it's called the immobilization type as opposed to the dematerialized type. And that wouldn't be so much of a problem if there's not a monopoly on the depository. The law talks about some legal foundation. Our securities law, written in 1992, gives a legal basis for immobilization for scriptless trading, but only when the depository is provided by the Stock Exchange of Thailand or its subsidiary. And that means that no one else can effectively be a depository. Lately, 2 years ago, a year or two ago, in our Fintech Challenge program, one contestant proposed to, it's Kun Top from Private Chain, proposed to do an exchange that used blockchain technology and settle real time, and he wants to take on the stock exchange. But of course, there's that legal monopoly that we had to find a way to fix for him. And while working on that, my question was, could we have digital shares? And we had to go back to the Ministry of Commerce and the EDDA, I don't know what it's the Electronic Transaction Development Agency or something like that, yeah. And they say that their law accommodates using different technologies to replace actual paper, but we need to have some final rules from the Ministry of Commerce. And of course, nobody is going to do that. So in the end, we tried to solve it by drafting this so-called Fintech Act or Fintech Bill, which we completed several months ago. That one section of that would try to provide a legal foundation for digital issuance and things like that. That bill has now been put back to the Ministry of Finance, and I don't know what's with it. So that's another problem with us, getting things fixed in a timely manner. There's the Foundation for Digital ID, and I think there's this whole working group supported by the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of DE. And there's some test case going on with the banks and brokers, so I'm hoping to see something coming out that year for that. There's still a little problem that in our law there's no basis for, no requirement for data portability. So brokers and banks may still feel that clients' information is their property, and although they are careful not to, they might be careful not to give it to others, fearing that they will be violating personal data right, but they also refuse to, I think they might also refuse to send that information to another provider, even upon the request of the client. So I think we still have a long way to go for that mentality. We try to propose something like that for securities rules, but the brokers objected. We have some challenges removing barriers for new players, and as I mentioned, that having a legal monopoly on something is something really hard to go around. And the case in point that I would like to bring as an example is that electronic trading platform, because our law talks about the exchange being a legal monopoly. We looked at other jurisdictions and we find that they don't need to call the electronic trading platforms exchanges. They are called like ATSs in the US. So we tried to look for that route. And we found that in most jurisdictions, those are like brokers, because I think they start from brokers. The problem is our brokerage license regime is also not helpful because it's still too rigid and expensive. Brokers have to pay upfront fee to the SEC of 20 million baht. We try to change that. We try to remove that upfront fee. The ministry objects, saying that it would affect previous players who have paid, even though we think we have a way of trying to compensate. So they refuse to allow us to change that. So instead, we have to go around to a different route and define electronic trading platform as a different type of securities business. So it doesn't need to be a broker and pay us 20 million baht. But when I define a different type of securities business, again, we need to wait for a year to a year and a half before the rule would take effect because it needs to go through all the channels, and that's really frustrating. So when we define that business, we add in a little clause that says you don't need a license if you are under the SEC sandbox, and we were able to pull that off for some reason. So now that's the only channel that people who wants to provide an electronic trading platform service in Thailand can come. They can be under our sandbox. I'm not proud to say that we use the sandbox as a way to solve our problem with licensing. So it's not a sandbox in the way that what most people would think. It should be an experiment by the providers or by the regulators. We have some problem with the cross-border challenges, defining the boundaries of jurisdiction. I think that's quite common around the world. Cross-border enforcement effectiveness, but then the most important of all, I think for us, is the mindset of the policymakers. I'm not sure if our policymakers are truly ready for cross-border activities. Just to take an example of this ICO, we already get a directive from the Ministry of Finance that for now, they think that issuers should not be foreign companies. They should be companies set up in Thailand. And so what the most we could try to do is to make sure that that doesn't go in the law that they're drafting. And we offer to put it in our rule instead. So don't be surprised if we come up with some rule like that, because it's better for these things to be in our rule than to be in the law, because our rule is easily fixed. There's a challenge of dealing with finding an effective supervision regime for this so-called platform economy. And the traditional ways of doing things that we count on our activities being done through centralized providers like the exchange or a group of brokers that aggregate around this centralized broker exchange. So our traditional thinking is that we use permission for everything, permission for all kinds of players, prescription for all kinds of conduct, and even restriction for investors if we think that it's good for them to be restricted. And so that, to me, is like saying that we are, or the government would be the central authority of what they think is good and right and good for the market. And it doesn't really encourage market discipline. It's an obstacle to market-based solution that could happen. For example, with mutual funds, we need people to provide independent advice for investors other than the banks who are selling the products. And it's really hard for us to get to find a way to get make room for these independent advisors because of the thinking around everything being tied with banks in the past. So that's finally the idea of restricting investors from buying something. The ministry also says they don't want retail investors to buy that. We offer, of course, to put a limit, a ceiling, which people are not happy about, but it's better than not allowing anything. And this kind of restriction is also not appreciated by investors. So the SEC's idea of a desired regime would be one that could have more room for competition, more information flow, more tools to help interpret and compare, more ease of switching, which can now be afforded by technology, so that people could have true choice, and that would lead to true market discipline. But that kind of thinking, that's like wishful thinking, and we are struggling to carry our organization or the rest of the authorities to move, to switch their mindset to that. And that's a really big challenge. And I might save the thing about ICO and tax for later.
In fact, two cents on my thoughts on the whole disruption world. So a few days back, I was reading a report by Yale on the Fintech disruption and innovation, and there was a very interesting analysis on what is an innovation and what is a disruption. So it said, if you do anything which makes current thing a bit better, it's known as innovation. And if you do a new thing which makes the old thing obsolete, is disruption. So yours is an innovation. So generally how it was being compared is all the fintech companies which are coming up, if they are making your life easier and they are not changing or they are not making the whole thing completely nullified, it's an innovation. We should not put it to the category of disruption or revolution. Whereas something like ICO, it's now an alternate way of raising funds. It may go into that direction of what you call it's a revolution or a disruption. So my thoughts on this.
Yeah. So thank you, Vinay. Thank you, AMCHAM, for this honor. It's not often that an operator get to share the same level on stage with the honorable regulators and the challenges we have heard so far. But if I want to put things into perspective for you here, from a perspective of an operator and how I feel, because I do have some sympathy with the regulators here, and not just the SEC, and to be fair, you're hearing from SEC who is I'm one of the more closer to the 4.0 regulator than a few other regulators in Thailand who are closer to 0.4 than 4.0. Thailand 4.0 being the main strategic long-term aim. And maybe as Vinay said, he's not being quoted on this. I'm happy to be quoted, but on a more personal basis. I'm not speaking on behalf of the stock exchange nor on behalf of CLSA. So this is my personal viewpoint here today, just to share frankly the view with you. So this is not neither the view of the exchange nor the CLSA, but many there, some of them do share similar kind of views in the background. The challenge I think the regulators here have, as you often know, is that when you go to a country, you have to appreciate sometimes the intricacies on the local sensitivity regard to the tradition, the culture, the way different businesses grow and operate. And different countries will have their own different uniqueness of the tailored way that you will see challenges. This government has a good big grand plan, and by government I mean the government at the moment being headed by General Prayut. And if you read into the detail of the National Strategic Plan, the 20-year plan, and you read deep into it, you will see it's well intended, and a lot of details in there have got so much, I would say, all the plan strategy heading in the right direction of where we should be heading for the future. Except that the future is now, and it's coming very fast, and the government may be struggling to find ways to implement certain steps to get there in a more timely manner. And this is causing some difficulty because countries around us are waking up and embracing new technologies, not just embracing by using it, because Thailand is one of the countries where we totally embrace new technologies long before any other countries. You know, I think we're one of the largest people who use Facebook actively, Line, social media, you name it, you know, many other ways that we use actively on that. However, when it comes to the mindset, as Pika and Suda has correctly pointed out, the mindset of the civil servants who need to drive this forward, it is tricky, it's difficult. You have to sympathize with them because on the one hand, they're juggling with stability, the right to protect consumers, to regulate, to make sure that the environment of safetyness is there. And they're coming from a background of what? Of a Tom Yum Goong crisis in 1997. So therefore, from background, when they regulate this, they think about how do we make sure that Thailand, as a country, financial institution, the financial system is stabilized. That is their primary concern. Of course, now they're wearing a second hat, which is the development hat. They're trying to develop industry, finding out new challenges, and I'm actually great to see that our regulator is pushing and challenging the stock exchange to do more, because as a board member of the board of governors, and I spoke this openly, I want the stock exchange to grow up, to be more mature. We are 42 years old, but yet we are complacent. We are monopoly. Not game in Thailand, they call it monopoly. So therefore we have no competition. And at times we become complacent about what we do at the stock exchange, where the technologies elsewhere are running already forward. And of course, some of you may say, hey, ICO exchange may come and replace one day. It is a possibility, of course, and great. You see the Fintech Challenge brought out one of the blockchain writers who can write a program that will replace the stock exchange itself. So this is a great challenge that the management on the day-to-day level of the stock exchange has to think about how we operate and do this. The board of directors was in London last year to see all the new Fintech and the regulation in the UK, which is one of the more liberal and the more advanced in operating. And we are going to Israel actually tomorrow night. We're flying to Tel Aviv, we're flying to Turkey, then on to Tel Aviv to see the fintech ecosystem in Israel, to see how blockchain and how the fintech ecosystem evolves there. I think there are more works that the SET itself will look into the future, because for me personally, I'm definitely pro-competition in terms of the stock exchange itself to have more exchanges to be open up to the new technologies that we need to use. Especially the reform in the back office, the whole revolutionary, I would call, not just reform, but I think it's the whole almost like a coup for the back office. Because while the front office has gone through a lot of revolution, you see new products, new offerings for the private wealth management clients, the settlements, the custodians, all those record keepings, they need a revolutionized way of keeping them and using that data. You know, the exchange ourselves has not monetized nor used the data as efficient as the London Stock Exchange or a few other exchanges in the world. So I think that can definitely be used a bit more. I will touch a little bit as well on the way that brokers ourselves are operating. We have been definitely waking up to the way that our clients choose to pay us, the asset management firms. They're paying brokers in different manners. Long gone are the day where traditional broking would pick up the phone, sending emails, sending facts, sending ideas, and writing reports, and you would get paid. No, of course not. In this is a day of where you're trading not against humans, but against robots, against robo-advisors, against people who sometimes don't need nor impacted by emotions. When the market are crashing, they know how to take advantage when the market volatile move. And often there is a good size for that, but often it amplifies the volatility you're seeing in the stock markets you're seeing today. And it definitely will amplify more going forward. There are more funds that are being launched, and not just traditional ETF products, which are obviously leading to some market volatility at the close of the market. But there are funds who are linking more the strategy impact in terms of whether they look at the volumes, look at the price criteria, the arbitrage they can do, sometimes for the stocks that listed in different markets. So that there are funds that are coming to us and say, look, can we connect with you directly to a co-location business, high frequency trading, which have a frequency that the faster speed that will trade than the normal market participants. There are funds that now asking us that, okay, yes, you don't need a traditional read your report and pay you traditional service, but all they want is just a structured product where we make sure that we guarantee them the best price. Just purely just on flows, guarantee the flows, the blocks. So therefore it moves to a different ballgame, and the regulators in Europe have picked up this MiFID, as you may have heard, the new regulation in Europe, which is even really, really tighter. So actually the environment of regulations in Thailand and the region relative to Europeans and America on that front has been kinder. The challenge we see though in Thailand, I think for me personally, is one where how do you cultivate a regulatory fairness? Fairness, what's the word, justice in the regulation. Because when the rule of law comes out, yes, it's for development, it has to be fair, and it has to be fair, and it has to be giving innovators a room to breathe and run before they get suffocated and die while the innovation hasn't gone. Allows the fintech, and not just fintech, any new startups to run and get ahead of the game and run and compete. And they strike the right balance between creating an environment where you want that competition and that environment where collaboration can exist. Because on the one hand, you need some incumbents, and I tell you, incumbents are no longer dinosaurs. They're not. Long gone are the day where the bank CEO needs to look at their nose to talk about blockchains. They don't need that. Even Jenny didn't now embrace cryptocurrencies or talk about all this stuff before he says it's a fraud. Now he say, hey, actually we may be able to use some of those blockchains. So there are bank CEOs who now, they're not dinosaurs, they know all this. So that there are rooms, I think, that regulators have to look at in Thailand, how they can create an environment both in terms of a conducive regulatory environment where to both compete, allow the smaller firms to be able to compete and yet collaborate with the bigger guys. You will hear later from one of the bigger guys here in the room, who will tell you how you can both collaborate and perhaps also compete. But for me, the regulating have to look at the whole picture from a bird's eye viewpoint. And I say this because I give you an example, and apologies if I offend any American firms here, it's not my intention to, but I think those American firms do want to pay fair tax in Thailand. Tax in Thailand, you may have seen the headlines recently. The government has started to collect tax, or want to collect tax on cryptocurrency trading. Now, of course there are speculations in cryptocurrency trading. There are, like any potential speculation in stock markets. So there are crypto exchanges in Thailand. Perhaps they should be paying tax, yes. But of course, if those are paying tax or should be paying tax for the crypto traders or whatnot, you should also look at other companies who are operating in the new economy 4.0 who also should be paying tax. And by that I mean, look at who are the largest advertisers in Thailand. Any guess? Who are the largest advertising company in Thailand? It's an American firm. Facebook? Actually, it's Alphabet. It's Google. It's Facebook. It's a Korean firm. Naver, Line, who owns Line. Those three are the largest advertising company in Thailand. How much tax are they paying? Anyone know? Zero. Well, Alphabet is paying 300,000 baht. I mean, considering their billions in revenue. And no offense to them, actually, they want to pay tax. And by tax, I mean, take very simple thing. There are big dominant players now, so they're not startups like you who can register in Singapore and pay a VAT. In Thailand, if you were to take out adverts with Channel 3, EEC World, with Thai Rat newspaper, one of the largest local newspapers, do you pay tax? You pay a VAT tax, 7%. If you were to take out ads in Facebook, Google, and Line, do you pay tax? No. That's a big missing tax from the Ministry of Finance coffer. Please help me ask them why they're not rushing on that piece of tax collection as much as rushing on the cryptocurrency tax collection. It's an open question. I'm not saying you're wrong to collect tax on cryptocurrency. There are regulators around the world who do collect tax from cryptocurrency traders. However, if you collect too early, they will go elsewhere. Cryptocurrency traders are not stupid. They do have ways to sell their assets abroad. They do have bank accounts abroad. So what I'm saying is sometimes is that in a world where it's driven by technology and technology has no borders, are we regulating, is the conducive regulatory environment enough for this 4.0 regulatory environment? Dr. Goksak Putakul has been commended for trying to do the regulatory guillotine effort. And I commended him for trying on that. And that's why I told you all the blueprints, all the key national strategic direction is correct. The implementation is the real challenge. Because when Dr. Goksak says, I know what's blocking 4.0, he knows it. And it's the regulatory issues. Look at Korea. Why does Korea Samsung findings? They don't have it just because they have better technology than Thai people. Thai people actually can write codes pretty well, by the way. There's a guy called Baramit Inso, who's been brilliant. He studied at Johns Hopkins. He was one of the top scientists in Thailand. He graduated, worked for Microsoft, worked for the Thai army on the cybersecurity front. Then set up his own firm and wrote his own cryptocurrency called Satcoin, and then have a TDAX as an exchange, crypto exchange. So that people with both the mindset, the ability, the aggression, the appetite to do their own entrepreneur. But do the regulations allow them to prosper? You probably have seen the news, what they've done to him or to his exchange. In Korea, over the last 30 years, there's a man called Dr. Scott Jacobs. He's American, by the way, American lawyers. If you haven't met him, you should meet him. Scott Jacobs has been credited for setting up what Korea has today. So basically, for every new law that's being introduced in Korea, one new law, 2 or 3 will be taken out. It's called the regulatory guillotine process. So you cut out unnecessary regulation, the old regulations. So Dr. Goksak tried to do this. So we hired him for Thailand. Bank of Thailand, I think all of you, I think the SEC also worked with him. Yeah. So, but guess what? Once Dr. Goksak hired him, there is a process of hiring. You need to go through a procurement law. Procurement decree in Thailand. The new procurement decree aim is good, well intended, to be transparent, to be non-corrupted, and all these criteria. But guess what happened? The civil servant doesn't want to sign. So they say, oh, I'm scared of going to jail. I'm going to be in jail. So he wants to get the budget to buy the software from Scott Jacobs to start this regulatory process. We can't even buy it. And this is Dr. Goksak, who is direct commandment from Dr. Sopkit, from the Deputy Prime Minister. You can't get the software. It takes a long time. But Dr. Scott Jacobs has been hired for 9 months. They can't even hire the right computer, the software to do this properly. So that is, for me, that is one example of the frustration that I think in the private sector we know the government mean well, but often if they're going to reform, they have to tackle it heads on, and the reform perhaps the mindset that you mentioned, and the civil servant itself, and the tax collection I mentioned. We haven't even gone to the sales tax, by the way.
Because Bryn mentioned this cryptocurrency tax, I might have a piece to say here, even though I have to disclaim that I'm not part of the Revenue Authority, and in fact I have no position from the SEC saying this. So this is a personal view, and based on what I see in the newspaper, they talk about taxing income that's paid out of ICO at 15% and capital gains tax of 50%. And I wasn't thinking much of it. I mean, we can talk about whether this is competitive and so on. But I was more appalled by the rumors that I've been hearing that when you talk about fairness, the revenue authority has this authority to assess income tax, or assess what they think is the proper level of revenue for a company. So you sell something at 100, but you claim that you sell at 50, then they have to they have the right to say, no, it's not 50, it's 100, right? What I'm hoping would not happen is that they might use that kind of authority to tax people on the issuance of ICO. And I think that would kill everything. I mean, that's worse than taxing income from ICO or taxing profits upon traders, because if that really happens, and I'm crossing my fingers, I'm hoping that it will not happen. It's not in the law that they're proposing. It's an existing law that allows them to tax companies. And so it would be good if people talk about it a lot in the public, so that about the idea of fair taxation and why it would be detrimental to the country to start if you don't try to make it clear that fundraising isn't taxed. And it's not just a matter of people going to do ICO elsewhere, but it's now a matter of people not wanting to set up a company in Thailand at all. I mean, I don't think the government is out there to just be bad and tax it for themselves. But it must be the idea that they are afraid of the risk and harm that these new innovations might bring, and try not to show support, and it might go overboard. So that's something that I need to, I hope to stimulate people to talk about a lot without quoting the SEC.
And this is the balance that is tough to strike, because one thing I'm not sure you're aware is that one of the largest ICO raised by a Thai company is called Omise. And Omise raised a lot of fundings in Switzerland through Ethereum platform, the ICO, the Omise coin. And of course they couldn't do this in Thailand originally. There was no understanding, no trust, nothing to do this. After they issued a cryptocurrency, and I guess didn't get much press in Thailand on that cryptocurrency issue, the Prime Minister of Thailand actually gave them the Startup of the Year award last year. It was a big front page newspaper headline. Within 1 month of that award, the Prime Minister comes and say, oh, cryptocurrency is fraud. It's a channel, it's a, what do you call it, a Ponzi scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme, don't touch it. Again, as I say, there are Ponzi schemes in cryptocurrencies. I'm sure there are some coins which are, but I think, as you probably all here know, the coin has two sides. And then there is a useful side, the blockchain system that back up, and some good coins, and there are some naughtier guys who are definitely out there just to punt and to be a Ponzi scheme. But when the Prime Minister say that, I think for me, it sent out some of the difficult message to some of the startups or would-be companies that want to do business in Thailand, and then to want to raise money through the ICO or the good work by the SEC, on the regulations, the hearings on the ICO, and some people are concerned on that front. And then afterwards, when Omise come back to Thailand, people applaud. There's another company called Siam Organic. Siam Organic may not be a totally high-tech company, but it's a new economy company business. They couldn't raise money in Thailand. They go and raise money in the US and be famous in the US. And then they came back and be applauded and be, oh, you were a genius. So Thai people sometimes it's a mindset issue that we do applaud the Thais who've been successful abroad, then come home or applaud the successes from abroad, rather than have a more mindset to really have this homegrown talent, especially in regard to new technology. So that is sometimes a tricky thing. We haven't got the first unicorn locally groomed totally yet, whereas Indonesia have that Gojek. And Gojek is growing from just a delivery platform into a Fintech platform now, as you're aware, acquiring some wallets and payment platforms. Could we have similar companies like that in Thailand growing? The whole ecosystem, I think, perhaps need to be improved. One point I want to touch before I finish is that I think regulators in Thailand, and again, as I say, I have all the highest respect for the Bank of Thailand, who is the banking regulators. High respect, because without them I wouldn't be here today. You would wonder why I say that, because my parents both worked there, and they met each other and fell in love with the Bank of Thailand and married. So without the Bank of Thailand and the scholarship they gave to my father, I wouldn't be here today. With that grateful in mind, I think there's a lot of smart people and a lot of honest and well-intended people there. The challenge they have now is how do they balance between protecting the stability of the big financial companies who are operating in Thailand versus the ones who are growing and competing and will be, and already are competing, and some will be competing with those financial institutions. It is a tough balance because, give you an example of peer-to-peer lending. A peer-to-peer lending, we have no one who wants to take charge of this regulation in Thailand. The Ministry of Finance say, oh, it's a bank plan job, and oh no, it's your job, your job. And so they haven't, it's not the SEC who's doing the equity side of things, already done on the equity side. But on this lending side, on the loans, the debt side, who is going to regulate that? Indonesia, they already have peer-to-peer lending. Philippines has it. There's a company called Oriente, which operates in Hong Kong. The founder is one of the co-founders of Ethereum. It's a proven technology. It's a true peer-to-peer. So you know how peer-to-peer is. Sometimes there are companies a lot of companies are pseudo peer-to-peer. So some of them are real institutional money in disguise and try to zigzag through the regulation arbitrage, trying to get the loophole and just a finance company. There are real peer-to-peer guys who want to operate, and Thailand is a country, classic country, where a lot of good ideas from the small, medium enterprise and smaller guys need better funding, or better funding platform, or access to funding. It's very tricky, especially this is an area where I think the rural area has rooms to grow the fastest. For us in Thailand, the unbanked, or the guys who can't reach those funds, but with good ideas in the rural areas, need better service on that front. I know the government is trying to do a village bank, local community bank. That's a good idea, but there are also technologies that can help push it faster because everyone in the rural use mobile phone. They're beginning to use more smartphone. Smartphone price will come down. So I hope that this peer-to-peer lending eventually would get a good regulation with this.
In fact, Kunjitsa's words are golden words for many people on the ICO tax side. So that's one word what everyone's looking at because of this whole news about capital gains tax being levied on ICOs. Your personal views may inspire many people to kind of go on for another public hearing on this and kind of submit their what you can say inputs to the regulator on this tax issue.
Right. I think that you can. I don't know if the tax authorities are not. I don't know if they accept public hearing, but I think they need to hear comments, not just on the tax on what the ICO would pay out of capital gains, but as I remind you, call for clarity, call for clarity from the tax authorities that they shouldn't tax people on funds raised, and I think this is not in their. This is not something that in their rule that they are doing a hearing. It's an interpretation of an existing rule that they don't need to fix, but you need them to fix. So it's like they're not offering a new rule, but the fact that they're not giving a new rule that gives you this clarity is going to be a problem for you. So you need to press them on that.
No, coming from India, tax authorities have wide discretion. They can do anything from a perspective of it. And a joking part about Facebook and Google, ICOs don't have CEOs traveling around the world with Mark Zuckerberg delegation or Sundar Pichai meeting the president and prime ministers of the world. So maybe that will take some time before those taxes are there. So maybe if there are any questions for the panelists, we can just keep it after the session. I have some questions for the panelists so that we can have their insight on a few of the direct questions vis-a-vis the fintech space and how it's operating. So maybe we'll start with that. My initial question is kind of summarizing what you guys said. If I compare the landscape or the regulatory landscape of various countries in Asia or where fintech is kind of more prevalent, it's divided into three phases or kind of an approach. One is a very active approach wherein the regulator lays down a lot of, you can say, supportive regulations. They are supporting the fintech companies to grow, and kind of there is a balance between the general public interest and the fintech, but it's more pro towards the fintech companies. The second approach has been on the passive side, wherein the regulators have been sitting quiet. I think sometimes Thailand are on that side, but they talk about it. So on the passive side, it's you're sitting quiet, you are neither supporting the fintech companies, neither banning them. So it's kind of that passive approach. Then there is a restrictive approach, which says something like China. You get up and say, no, this is not allowed, or you cannot do this. And for every approach, they take the consumer protection or the public interest gamble. So, in a nutshell, what would you think Thailand's approach is and will be, let's say, because it's fintech, I don't say coming 3 to 4 years, but I would say in coming 2018 or 19, what do you think will be the regulator's approach vis-a-vis Thailand?
Should I talk about just the SEC or are you talking about Thailand in general?
SEC's view and going forward, what do you think the regulators will? So it's
okay. With the exception of crypto, I would say that our approach, we try to take the active approach of supporting general and fintech, and maybe a little bit more on fintech. The difficulty is in the implementation. And the goal is, we want to take that active approach. I think the obstacle there is not so much mentality, but because we are restricted by our tools, because we still have to operate under the existing law and rules, and it's really hard to change our laws. It's not so hard to change our rule, but it's hard to change our law. And so it's like you have all these square boxes, and then suddenly you need to find ways to fit things that don't fit in that square boxes, in those boxes, and you have no other choice but to fit them. And the example I mentioned about going around that legal monopoly of the exchange, for example.
Appreciating the culture, tradition of each country. Some countries that say ban ICO, like China, they don't actually ban cryptocurrency. If you look into the detail, China has a coin, it's called NEO, and that coin is being traded. The Chinese will do it their way. They ban Google, Facebook, Line, WhatsApp, all the stuff, Instagram. But what do they have? They have Tencent, they have WeChat, they have Baidu, they have Alibaba. So China will do it. They're one of the smartest out there in terms of this innovation and letting it run. India does it a different way, of course. Your government has been very smart at Modi has been very smart at opening up India 4.0 truly by e-cataloging billions of your population and have this central KYC that companies like Bajaj Finance can lend, can decide if they would grant you a loan within minutes of you going on their platform. If you allow them to click the approve button. Remember, banks own your ID, own your information, and information in the digital age is gold mines. And that data is now being used for the public at large to the benefit of the public to access more capital. Bajaj Finance, by the way, is a listed firm. The stocks, needless to say, has gone up, I think, 20 times over the last 4 or 5 years in India, and probably can still double from here. Singapore, they've used the data, public transport data, they open it up to Grab and Uber to use it. For what? For better public service. So they can have a Grab share bus. So now they have Grab bus or sharing rides, which I think Thailand also has, like Pamba share where you go through apps. They're doing the ride sharing at the moment. But they're not getting access or this data portability that we talk about in the fintech regulations. Would it be enforced? Is there punishment if the government agency don't hand over the data in time? How quick should they hand over the data? The use of data will be crucial and important, and how government collect data and store it and record it properly. That will be, I think, would define the eventuality of the successes. But I think Thailand will have our own ways to go about doing this. And Bank of Thailand, yes, they are skeptical on cryptocurrency, just only because, obviously, within the ruling powers has some concern on the security front. But they are opening up to a little bit. If you speak to Dr. Somkit, his son is doing cryptocurrency stuff. And he admitted it to us. We were in the meeting with him together. And he frankly speak openly about this. I mean, he's very pushing on understanding. He said we can't stop the young Gen Z from doing what they're doing. He knows this. So this is the number one guy. He gets it. Now it's just how do the public has to help also. And I hope you will hear later from JFinCoin of how the good ICO will set a good precedent. Solid one. There is another one coming up, the Carbonium, I believe, on the social trading platform, which is very interesting. And the SEC has looked at this social trading platform that are already happening in the US and UK. So that's also another interesting ICO to come up in Thailand. There's a few series of them, and I hope that they would set a good precedent.
I can understand why they want to do anything but changing the law. Because I've spent, the longest time I've spent was coming up with this Futures Act, derivatives law. It took us like 9 years, like maybe 2 years drafting, because it was new to us and things were changing. And the time we were drafting, there was this Barings case, so we had to be really careful. But then after that, it's like 6 or 7 years passing the law in the normal time, and then that's why people resort to other forms of law. And so when there is this government, this military government, everybody wants it as an easier, faster way of fixing the law, or using this special power, Section 44. But that's not really good. And sometimes when you come out with the law too fast, and it can be also used, like for example, this ICO law. The SEC is ready to come out with an SEC regulation on ICO offering, and we conducted a hearing for a couple of months. And then, the policy now is that it has to go together with other crypto assets and be under the same special law. And they will make it quick because they use a different type, called like the decree or something, I don't know. But then that requires no public hearing. So it's almost like, I can understand the frustration or the fear of going to change the law, because one hand, you can't get anything. And then on the other hand, you have a way of passing something really quickly, but you could go wrong because you don't talk to people. And it's like, I don't know which is the worst evil.
I think the authority has to think about the long-term implications and not take a wrong turn, because what the wrong turn is happening at the moment, you mentioned, is what I fear is over-regulation, and we've talked about this about intricacy of tradition in different countries, but for Thailand, I feel that, as I mentioned, the Korea example, the lesser, and it's studied worldwide, the lesser the regulations or licenses there are, the higher the competitiveness of that economy will become, and the vibrancy and the economy will prosper from the entrepreneur. Of course, then how do you strike a balance? Part of it, I would hope, and I would urge the Bank of Thailand, I'm sure the SEC beginning to do this, is to begin to strike up partnerships, meaningful partnerships. The Malaysian authorities, both on the regulators front, the Central Bank of Malaysia, have already struck up a key relationship with Australian market, with the US. Singapore Monetary Authority of Singapore has struck up with the Bank of Canada on the payment and the cross-border transactions. They've struck up a relationship with a few other countries around the world who has better technologies than them. And that exchanges mean that whenever fintech firms or new economy firms want to raise capital or come and do business in Singapore, it becomes easier. And vice versa, if Singaporean homegrown talents want to raise capital from the world or from those markets who gets it or understand this newer technology, it becomes easier. So that kind of a good partnership, I think needs to be struck. It also makes them understand and keep up to date and up to speed with regulations elsewhere around the world. Then regulators will never ever be ahead of all these entrepreneur businesses. They will run faster and they will get ahead of it. And regulators should allow that to prosper before to have guidelines or some form. There are sandboxes that can happen, yes, although often at times to get sandbox licenses itself is not the easiest thing in the world either. So sometimes I think some businesses already started operating without the sandbox and go ahead with it. As long as you say, like in Singapore example, if it doesn't meaningfully impact the economy or the ecosystem at large or impact the large consumers, then they let it run for a while and see. And often the culture has to accept failures. Thai people sometimes look down upon people who fail from education level. People who top of the class and good students get applauded, get accolades, get to put in the class like we call it Hong King, Hong Queen. We have a king and queen rooms for the top students. But it's often the entrepreneurs and the smart guy, the whiz kid, the one who are truly creative, and the naughtier ones, the one who fail, who get grade Z or F. So, I'm not saying they're weird, they're good ones, although I met met this guy Vitalik, the Ethereum founder in Thailand, and he was a bit interesting. He failed a few exams, and he did sound a few weirdo stuff, but that Thai society, and I'm sure ASEAN has to learn and accept failure. And of course, of their businessmen. Some businessmen fail generally not because they're crooks or because they're frauds, but they fail just because their business models may be ahead of the time, or maybe just the wrong timing. But they fail and get up and fail again and fail again and get up. They may fail many times. Some of the best creators in the world, Albert Einstein or whoever, fail many times before they succeed. So that culture of acceptance has to, for me, take into account, and society will take a look at that, because the whole regulatory issue for me personally, for the technology, goes beyond the actual digital economy itself, because it is the human who use the technology. It is the Ministry of Education who has to change and improve and modify their curriculum, their education, if we are to prosper and get the new mindsets into the people to accept the fintech world. It is the Ministry of course, of Finance to look at ways to allow new ways of funding the venture cap, the new source of funds, to go cross-border. It is the Ministry of Commerce who should allow foreign firms to own majority stakes in fintech firms in Thailand. It's still being banned. I had a crowdfunding platform, this company, Sintmatana Phoenix, Quek Hong Sin from Singapore. She has a wonderful technology from Singapore. She set up in Thailand, and she couldn't get anywhere because for the last 1 year, she had to get a foreign business license from the Ministry of Commerce. She owns a majority stake in the company. And the need to operate that business in Thailand, you need to get an FBL license. To get FBL, you go to the Ministry of Commerce. To get that license, you need to go to the Board of Investment, BOI. BOI took her 9 months plus for crowdfunding platform, and then come back another few months at the Ministry of Commerce, and then come back perhaps to get the crowdfunding license from the SEC. It takes her the whole process of 1.5 years. By now, her business is dormant, is dead, because ICOs everywhere. So her business is finished almost in a way. So she has to rethink about how the business is moving. So this is just an example where regulators and regulation will play a very key role.
Is it the right time to start drafting a law for data protection or data privacy specific for financial institutions, which can only go, because that's one of the area where data is being played big time.
I thought Facebook were using our data for free, and so are Thai banks. So, I mean, for me, it should be more open and free and open to use in an appropriate manner, using blockchain for it, like your government has done in India. So India has been very, I would commend the government of India to actually e-catalogs and allowing that use of public data if you authorize. So if you say Vinay wants to have an account and use the service of Bajaj Finance, then you click approve, and it's your consent. It's under your consent, not under the bank's consent to have the right to use your data to come up with creative financial services, which then they sold it back to you. So for me, I mean, the use of data, yes, there are some concerns of privacy and whatnot, but I think I gave you an example of Singapore government, how they gave the traffic data away. I think the fintech law, the success of this new executive decree will depend on the disclosure, the portability of data, and how the timely, and there should be a punishment clause in there. I believe in the decree there's no punishment, nor the forcing the timeline of how quick the government must hand over the data. So,
for for person that the owner of the data provides authorization, I think that should not. I mean, that would not. I don't think that would contravene that personal data privacy law. But I think we have a problem of sharing anonymized data because the law, the previous drafts that I've seen, still requires consent, that it is anonymized, who will get consent from, right? And we try to address that in the Fintech Act. There's a section that we talked about. Open anonymized data from the government first. That the Act would require that where fintech providers want to obtain data that is in possession of the government, if it's not, if there's no prohibitions specifically for sharing that data, then they should be able to request anonymized data from that government. And we then add a clause that even if it's voluntary sharing by anyone, if they want to share anonymized data, then that can be done. But it has to be anonymized in the way of the standards that's determined by subcommittee under that law. So I'm hoping that maybe that will
That would also look forward to a change into the credit information definition of what a financial institution would mean. So we look forward to the Fintech Act because we are eagerly waiting. So once it's up and how it's being implemented to make lives easier of our innovators.
I think you might need to call for it also because it's now, sitting with the Ministry of Finance.
Great presentation this morning. Question about, there have been many good points raised about, there's been mention about corporate venture capital and also venture capital. What do you see as the evolution in the marketplace in terms of access to capital for startups and for other fintech companies?
The mindset of Thai corporate family owners has to change on the risk appetite, on the risk, on how they view what is the cost. Thai families, corporates typically view investments as cost. I give you an example when I think ex-Prime Minister Yingluck gave a corporate tax reduction 6 years ago, five and a half years ago. Guess what most corporates do? They get a one-off tax cut. Guess what they do? They pay a special dividend. Most of them pay back a special dividend. A lot of Thai corporate listed in the Thai Stock Exchange of Thailand are commended for have nice, juicy dividend yield. But that comes at the expense of research and development, R&D. And that mindset within the investment risk appetite or the ability to both take a bit of a bold move, a bit of a leap of faith as much as looking this investment as not just cost, hit your bottom line straight away. A company called Delta has majority owners be foreign. They're a bit more daring. They invest in new electric vehicle charging station and electric batteries. Once they announce it, the share price has been hit. Over the last 1 year, it's been hit straight away. But recently it's recovered a little bit when people now, oh wow, EV is the future, now it's going to happen. So the share price is coming back saying, oh, you have a foresight to see that coming. Even though when they had the foresight a year and a half, 2 years ago, to start doing the EV batteries and charging stations, the shareholders punished them for making that investment. But I think incrementally over the last few years, I think Thai corporates are, especially the ones who are in the technological fields, like True Corporation, InTouch, are beginning to be a bit more creative about deploying their assets or their cash pile that they have. And the corporate venture capital mentality that InTouch already seeded some, like Ubi and a few other firms within the startup space is encouraging. I just hope that even PTT, Siam Cement, all these guys are joining, even Banpu. Even in one crucial area that I want them to have is the corporate venture capital that seeds not just company of new business or innovation technology, but company that has social innovation. Because digital economy is good, but digital divide is bad. And a country like Thailand, you are going to see an acceleration of inequality if regulators do not take a good look at this. Because there are people who have and have not, and there will be more have and have more with technology like this. So I hope that corporate venture capital landscape, and that's something that Stock Exchange of Thailand is trying to do, I'm trying to push them to do. We set up a 1 billion baht fund for CVC, the Corporate Venture Capital Fund. And we're looking at ways how to support the social entrepreneur, the social enterprises. A lot of them are using new technology, new platform. But the beautiful thing about Thailand is how you combine the 0.4 with the 4.0. And by that I mean, because we have to know what our strength is. Thai people know that our strength is not 4.0. I've already discussed why it's not. The strength is in 0.4. It's in empathy. It's in smiling. It's in taking care. It's in servicing. That is the inherent strength of the Thai people. You still have to use that network of family networks and kindness and hospitality. And I give you one example of the company that's using that well. Local Alike. Local Alike won the Banpu Social Entrepreneur Business Awards a couple of years back. And Kun Pai should be commended. And if any of you have not used that service, you should use it. Local Alike. LOCALALIKE. So they use technology to sell and they try to hook up to Agoda. And Agoda was founded in Phuket. A couple of foreigners having holidays in Phuket and founded Agoda in Phuket. So he hooked up to Agoda, hooked up to the technological platform. Effectively, he sells local community-based tourism. So he's selling the stuff that Thais are good at and looking at hidden gems, some of the cities that are not as well visited, or some well visited cities, but which spots are more family-oriented, more homegrown talents, more like mom and pop style shops, allowing the local community to grow and prosper with the tourism industry. Because most of the time with the tourism industry, people who make the money for the 5-star hotels and the tour operator, the big tour operator, how do you then use technology to close that inequality or income gap is crucial for me. Because that's what technology should be there for and what digital economy should be all about. It's about allowing the connectivity to make the lesser, the smaller guys more connected and well off and getting a higher income share from the capitalism, so to speak. So I'm seeing good trends in Thailand in some company, but I'm hoping the CBC will not just be just the risk taker of those, but also look at the social impact angle. The new stuff, let the competition prosper, let the private sector run a lot of this stuff. The governments need to stand back and make sure that the regulations allow and facilitate the use of up-to-date, speedy technology from around the world, and make sure that partnerships, technologies flow in and happen as a partnership. And fine, you can monitor that, you can regulate that in the end, but at first there needs to be a network and free flow of technologies and partnership. I gave you a sample of ASEAN Fintech Innovation Network. I think AFIN is called AFIN, which I think a lot of the monetary authority around the world beginning to be partnered with this ASEAN Fintech Innovation, Finance Innovation Network, AFIN. You should Google and check up on them because a lot of the fintech companies and a lot of governments are beginning to work together because a lot of the fintech firms, their issue is they can't scale, and especially scale across borders. This network should allow them to enhance that possibilities, and as I mentioned earlier, technology should have no borders, no boundary, and the regulations, they need to talk with each other and catch up more on the network to be up to date, to speed, because while regulators can never be up to speed with all the entrepreneurs, they can at least use the better example of how regulators in other countries work to perhaps drive through and influence some of the changes in our countries like Thailand, where we often applaud the success of foreigners or the success of foreign firms and regulations in a good way, in a good way. So there are a lot of good samples. Foreigners have done, perhaps executed better than us, implement better policies on digital economy fronts than Thailand, and to form that network and to use that. And also I think it's crucial also on this issue is to have a credible research institute on fintech. Thailand used to have ATI, I believe it was the Asian Technology Institute, ATI, and now it's kind of gone down in terms of the standings and reputation, perhaps over the last few years. But it is crucial if the Eastern Economic Corridor, EEC, or the new Silicon Valley of Thailand in Srilacha, the 700 ride plot, were to succeed. They must need a credible academic institution. And that institution needs to drive the innovation and research networks around the world. Because once you have the research network, then policymakers can decide and have a credible policy based on the data and information, rather than based on connections and collusions and on favoring some big or whatever conglomerates that they may be out there. So I think it is a room for both policymakers to grow up and have that credible institution as a kind of research academic background as much.
I don't know if it's fair for me to comment on this because it's we're not the bank regulators, but my observation is that at least when I observe with the securities regulators, that we don't think a lot about, we've not thought of enough about the design of the landscape of how it would affect competition. Because even in the securities market, where we push for liberalization more than other regulators and more than other sectors of the financial industry, even after we liberalized licenses, it took us a number of years dealing with the reactions of incumbents. We've gone through the time when some newcomer would come in and offer services at smaller prices and cheaper prices, and there were like wide rejections from the incumbents, right? And so from that observation, from our angle, it might not be too much to say that we care a great deal about incumbents. And so carrying that to say the bank regulator, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if whatever facility or systems that are created, you need money from the incumbents, the big incumbents. And so then, the rules and the architecture might tend to favor the existing incumbents and not the smaller players, and unintentional or intentional, that's the way it is. So we have to admit that the regulators probably do not spend enough time thinking about competition, or does not make competition a goal or an objective for regulators. In fact, when you start talking about it, you might appear odd, but I think it's going to change over time. And messages like this, I think the regulators need to hear this kind of message. Not as advanced as the owner of the data getting paid for someone using that data, just simply requiring one intermediary to give the information from the customer who wants that information to be given to another intermediary in a machine-readable format is something that we can't get that ruling out. In the SEC proposed, we discussed this, whether it should be in the Fintech Act. Because we see that data portability idea in other countries' laws. We tried to put it in the Fintech Act, but the verdict from other regulators that each regulator can write their own regulation on this. So nobody wanted to put it in the Fintech Act. The question kept coming up in the Act, and someone from the Fintech Association kept bringing it up. At the SEC level, we said, okay, we tried to write it in our own rule. So we conducted a hearing with our brokers, and of course, it's there's a huge objection. Not huge objection, but the rest of us objected. So the objection was that first, it's their data. The government brought in a piece of copy of their ID. That's their property. What we key in our system is our property. This is their reaction. The next remark is that why should they put this to their competitor, and make it easy for their competitor, even when the customer demands. The SEC was approaching this because we wanted ease of switching, but of course the broker said, well, why should we support ease of switching? That would hurt us. And then there's because this giving out data in a machine-readable format requires them to create a platform or to invest in some facility. So why should they spend money doing that? And it's going to hurt them. And our response is to pull back from that completely and then rest our hope with the digital ID platform, because that might be a different way of getting cheap business.